According to written traditions, who was the king of the Jews at the time that Jesus was born?
Herod.
Who was the king of the Jews at the time that Jesus was crucified?
I don't know, but maybe Jesus.
For what crime was Jesus arrested?
Being heard to say things like, maybe I'm the king of the Jews, but I didn't say that actually.
What does the name Bar Abba mean?
Son of the Father.
Son of the Father. It is the child who makes the father, not the father who creates the child. Without the child, a man is not a father. In the nativity story, why does the king of the Jews demand the murder of every male baby?
Because there were some prophecies that said that there was going to be a male baby who was going to grow up and take the crown from Herod and become king of the Jews in his place.
Why is it said that the Judean Messiah was not Jesus?
Because he came too early. He was too soon. He's not due till 6,000 years of Jewish civilization, and back then it was only the year 3000. No, hold on. It was the year 3760 something. It was less than...
Is that your final answer?
Yeah, he's more than 2,000 years too early.
How did St. Paul become the official spokesperson for the Christian religion?
By writing letters to people who would make sure that they were published and kept for all posterity, so that it's the only proof there is that there was a Christianity is St. Paul's letters.
Why change name from Saul to Paul?
God told me to do it, apparently. It sounded more Roman.
That's Paul's explanation, that God told him to change his name from Saul to Paul.
Yeah, I think so. I think God, the reason them questions are there is because God told me to do it.
Okay. Why name change from Simon to Peter?
Jesus said so. He said, I want you to be a Greek rock that I can build my non-Jewish church on, because I'm now against the Jews because they wouldn't listen to me. I knew they wouldn't anyway because I'm omnipotent, said Jesus. Not. Next.
Why name change from Jacob to Israel?
Because the state of Jacob doesn't sound as cool as the state of Israel if you're going to build an empire. And neither does the state of David. It just sounds too English, and England hadn't been invented yet. So, Israel is far better than the state of England, or the state of Simeon, or the state of Judah. None of them just have the right ring, do they?
What do these name changes signify?
A change of state from born in sin to being born again, elevated in God's eyes, that you're good enough to teach the rest of them a right good lesson, the fucking wankers. The rest of them are wankers, Tara. They weren't doing what God told them. They need punishment, and there has to be some good guys to carry out the punishment, otherwise he'd have to just start again from scratch. And creating the whole world again is a bit much when you only want to fix the humans. Why should I have to create the whole world again when it's only if all the humans made in my image that are somehow wrong?
So by change of state, do you mean like liquid to gas?
No, I mean from sinful to redeemed. Jacob was a nasty little fucker. Stole off his own brother.
But Israel
kept telling lies and all kinds of things, and for some reason God, or whatever this is, chose Jacob and said, look, you little toe rag, if you do what I tell you, you'll have a great nation and everyone will be singing your praises. Saul was going around murdering all Jesus's friends. And then suddenly Jesus turned up and said, stop killing my friends, man. Here, get your head around this. And Jesus opened his eyes to the truth, and Saul went, crikey, I've been killing all the bad guys. Actually, they're good guys. I was bad, they were good. He's had a change of state. See what I mean, change of state? And who was the other one?
Simon to Peter.
Simon to Peter. So Simon just didn't get what Jesus was on about at all. Simon was just full of the fear and saying, look, just take care of yourself and don't be sacrificing yourself for everyone's sins, right? Just be a good king of the Jews and free everybody from the slavery of the Romans and we'll all be happy with you. But don't go getting yourself killed to save everyone's thingamajig. Don't do it. Just believe in the material realm and stay safe, Jesus. And Jesus said to him, get behind me, Satan. You haven't a fucking clue what I'm doing here in the Garden of Gethsemane or why I'm going to go up on Golgotha or any of the messianic fucking... You don't get that this world is just a shadow of the real world. You don't realise that hell on earth is actually earth. Type of thing. So anyway, his name had to be changed to show that he's not the gobshite who didn't get what it was all about.
So who changed his name?
Well, something like St. Paul said that Jesus said it. In the book. But Jesus is supposed to have said it to Peter for no great reason at all, except to give some sort of a foundation for the Catholic Church hundreds of years later.
Why did Jesus die for our sins?
Why did Jesus die for our sins? Because when the Jews were given the choice about whether to let Jesus live or die, they said, die.
So he had to give a reason to die to himself.
Why did he die for our sins? Well, he died because the Jews said, kill him. Why did he die for our sins? It was a sin of us to say, kill Jesus. Set Barabbas free. I'm being a bit lighthearted with these answers. I don't really want to set up some religion where people go, his answers were the perfect answers because he made up the questions. I want to kind of leave the questions kind of wide open instead of close them down and say this is the only answer because I am an expert. I spurt from my ex, like a Twitter account.
Why is the New Testamentes attached to the Old Testamentes? Why does the Old have plural testes?
Oh, because there was lots of old and there's only one new. The New Testament is Jesus. Isn't it? Is it?
Mm-hmm.
The Old Testament was loads of old guys testing their mind control governments.
So why is the New Testament attached to the Old Testamentes?
Because the New Testament makes absolutely no sense without there being an Old Testament to change state from. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
To story Jesus makes no sense without an Old Testament to rebel against, type of thing, or to fulfill. Without the backstory, there's no story.
What's the relation between Jesus and Adam?
Adam created the sin so that Jesus could redeem it. Again, Jesus couldn't fucking save the world if Adam didn't fuck it up. Kind of thing.
Is he ascended Jesus sitting on the right hand of the Father God in Eden?
Yeah, so I don't know if God actually has hands. So it's sort of a trick question. But then the other side of it is Eden. Does God actually have hands and walk around and sit around and stuff in Eden? And is Eden heaven? But yeah, can Jesus sit on God's hand, as in, can God's hand actually be a physical hand, as in, is there a physical dimension beyond this physical dimension in which God is actually present with Jesus and we can all go to that dimension if we pass Jesus and God's tests?
What is Heave N?
To Like in a tug of war, in a spiritual war, can you pull all those dirty souls up to heaven? Can you heave the numbers back to the hole, the upper hole, the high hole? And then N stands for numbers, and Numbers is one of the books of the Old Testament, and it's one of the numbers of the old books in the Old Testament that like just makes loads of prophecies about future times that already happened, that they'll happen again, only more final. The final stuff is in the Book of Numbers or something. But I don't know. I've never fucking read it, so I don't know.
And what is heaven?
What is heaven? What is heaven? What is heaven? What is heaven? I don't know what heaven is. Do you know what heaven is?
Adam was the first man who sinned against God by trusting the woman's instincts and deciding to make up his own mind about whether knowledge is good or evil. What is God?
Say that again.
From the top. From Adam.
Yeah.
Adam was the first man who sinned against God by trusting the woman's instincts and deciding to make up his own mind about whether knowledge is good or evil. What is God?
Yeah, so I think that question is actually just raising loads of questions about the whole basis of the whole Bible, of the whole spiritual belief system. Actually, I don't know if there is an answer to that.
Then that makes your next question obsolete.
Not really. I mean,
how do you know?
Yeah, that's, how do you know it's up? How do you know that there is no real answer to a question?
Yeah, okay. How do you know? Yeah, how do you know?
Let's just try them again. What's them two questions again then?
Okay. What is God?
No, before that.
Okay, Adam was the first man who sinned against God by trusting the woman's instincts and deciding to make up his own mind about whether knowledge is good or evil. What is God?
All right, so the truth of it is, for me, is that this word God, that is so much used out there in the world to describe something spiritual and the creator and the inventor of the universe and the be all and end all and the one who would not come down to earth, but when the time comes will judge everyone on earth as to whether they're going to be kicked out of earth into hell or whether they'll be allowed to stay on earth or whether they'll transcend up to this heaven place. I don't know where that is either. So this God is like a placeholder word that isn't really explained as far as I can see in the Bible. Yeah, he's alluded to. He walks with them in the cool of the evening in Eden and he chats with them, and then he kicks them out of the garden, but then he chats to certain people. Apparently the one he chatted to more than anyone else was Moses. Moses had the best relationship with God because he could pretty much see the guy's face. As in, Moses could pretty much see God as a physical being and wasn't at all freaked out about his omniscience and stuff. But those of these prophets were apparently hearing God directly, like Jeremiah and all the rest. And God was telling them stuff, and he was saying, I'm not happy with how you're running things down there, and go and tell that foreign king that he's pissing me off and I'm the real God and he's following false gods and all of that stuff. Type of thing. So this God is actually a being who speaks to humans and isn't very happy in the Old Testament with how they're all doing. Type of thing.
So what is God?
Then in the testaments and the stories and what everyone else is saying, it seems very dubious to me what God is, and he changes state from the Old Testament to the New Testament. He goes from being an angry, judgmental, controlling God to being this really nice guy who sacrifices his own son so that nobody has to be sacrificed anymore. But again, nobody's really listening to him, so the sacrifices keep happening. So he's an omnipotent God who's all powerful, who nobody's listening to when he decides that everything's groovy. But anyway, the other bit I'm getting around to is that he's apparently not talking to people anymore. Otherwise, people would be saying, God says, let's all just have peace now. And he's not saying that. Or maybe he is still talking to the top leaders in the Judaic religion, and they're just not telling us what he's saying. Maybe in the Old Testament they used to tell us what God was telling his prophets.
Or maybe
either he no longer has prophets, or they're no longer telling us what his prophets are saying. Kind of thing. Because what does God have to say about the war in Israel right now? Where can I look that up? What does God have to say about the World Economic Forum? Kind of thing. What's God's opinion about vaccinations or circumcision these days, or zoos? What does God think about zoos? Is it a good idea or a bad idea? So
your answer is God is. The answer to what God is in is dependent on the Testament, which is voicing him.
So I have come to the conclusion that what God is depends on who you're talking to, who you're listening to. And that actually says a much deeper truth, that God is to invoke. And so it depends on who's invoking God as to what God is. Because God literally means to invoke.
How do you know?
Because I looked it up in the net. It just takes me online. And it makes sense. Makes more sense than anything I found in the God Bible about what God is.
Is God described anywhere in the Bible stories?
Apparently, he's a bit described in the interaction between Moses and God. At first, he's a burning bush. But then after a while, he seems to be like pretty much a person that they chat to like their friend.
Okay, and earlier you described God as in one tome described him as vengeful and tyrannical.
Yeah, I didn't say tyrannical, but yeah.
No, but yeah, okay.
But yeah, that's a good word for it.
And in the other tome as peaceful and loving.
Yeah, he's a nice guy who wants to forgive everyone's sins.
And that description is derived at through how? Because he just described,
Jesus does the describing of God in the New Testament, and he says God is a nice guy.
And the old one?
The prophets are describing God, or like really stuff that isn't in my questions there, but good questions are, when Jesus was alone in the desert for 40 days, how did the apostles know what he was thinking? Because in the description of Jesus in the desert for 40 days, there's loads of description of what Jesus was thinking. So, you know, who is the objective observer who's observing what Jesus' thoughts were?
Because he didn't speak to anyone when he came out of the desert to say, I was thinking this.
Well, if he explained what was going on in the desert, they haven't put much ink on the page about it. If Jesus told the apostles what's really going on, they haven't bothered to write that in the Bible. Because it's all a mystery. You have to just bring them back around here.
Was Moses Jewish by blood?
Apparently.
Was Moses Jewish by cultural upbringing?
Apparently not.
Or was he brought up and educated as a pagan Egyptian?
Apparently.
Apparently how?
That's what it says in the story. So the story of Moses is apparently that to hide him from the nasty whoever was trying to kill Jews back at that time, he was hidden in a baby basket, a Moses basket. That's why they're called Moses basket. It's because he was hidden in a Moses basket and put in some reeds by the river, and then he floated down the river, the current continent. He floated down the river, and where he washed up on a river's edge was right down in Egypt, where the Egyptian pharaoh's wife was hanging out, and she found this little baby floating in a basket and went, "Oh, we'll have this baby and bring him up as if he's our own." That's the bit where he says he was brought up an Egyptian by the pharaoh's household. That's in the story.
Is the one God?
Here, I'll go back a little bit.
Yeah.
So the important thing there in that is with regard to Israel. You can become a citizen of Israel if you can prove that you have Jewish bloodline.
Yeah.
Through your mother.
Yeah.
In particular. But you can also become a member of Israel if you just agree to Israel's terms. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be born. So the idea is Palestinians or whoever can live in Israel, I think, so long as you sign up for the religion. So you can be religious Jew or genetic Jew, Israeli, whichever it is. It's all very confusing, you see. Mm. The questions are really meant to draw out, this is all a bit confusing. Rather than me lecturing some other culture about their culture, I'm not trying to lecture anyone's culture about their culture. I'm saying that culture is affecting my perception of the world, and I have questions as to whether this can be resolved in any other way than with bombs.
That's a very good point to highlight. Yeah. Is the one God an original Judaic belief, Egyptian belief, or Mosaic belief?
Well, as far as I've been educated, monotheism, the idea of the one God, is an Egyptian idea.
What is a Mosaic belief?
Mosaic is Moses' law.
Okay.
Mosaic, Moses. So Moses was given actual physical clay tablets up the mountain by God. And that's apparently described in the Bible, although I've never really read it, but it's so extant in knowledge that this is known. Even if you haven't read it, you've heard it.
Those are commandments, are they?
Yeah, the 10 Commandments are the basis of law. That's Moses' law. Now, changing state between the Old Testament to the New Testament, Jesus is said to have challenged Moses' law among the Judeans, among the Jewish. So the word Jewish comes from Judah, which is one of the 12 tribes. So to be a Jew is to say that you're not descended from any of Judah's brothers. You're just descended from Judah. So the 12 tribes of Israel are the 12 sons of Jacob. And only one of those sons is Judah. So all the Jews are descended from Judah. But that's just confusing to me. Why is it called Jews if Jews comes from Judah? Why is it called Israel if it's only Judea? If it's only...
And there are 12 tribes of Israel.
Yeah. So what's happened to those other... It's not being explained what's the story with the other 11 tribes. It's not really explained why are 10 of them lost. It's not really explained why this British Israelite theology upon which...
So 10 of them are lost and the 11th is...
I don't know.
The Arabs, Palestinians?
I just don't know.
Don't they?
I don't know, but the idea of the Arabs the Arabs are all descended from Abraham, who is a Jew, but he can't be called a Jew because Abraham is long before Judah. Judah is a descendant of Abraham. So Abraham can't be Jewish. But the Jews and the Muslims or Arabs are all descended from Abraham. So they're all cousins. And whoever the other 11 tribes are all cousins of the Judahs. So these are cousins of the Jews. And me, I've got some funny stuff that is nonsense, but it's there in the language. So the Saxons, who came to invade Britain and become the English, the Anglo-Saxons. Who are these Anglos and who are these Saxons? I just get this thing that the Saxons sounds like the Isaac's sons. And Isaac again is a Hebrew descendant who's in the Hebrew texts. But here we're talking about Hebrew as being a language rather than a genetic race. So the confusions again are what's the Hebrew language and what's the Jewish bloodlines.
You mean, was it only Jews that spoke Hebrew?
No, I'm saying that everyone is so confused about all this stuff that you can call the Jews Hebrews. But as far as I can figure out, the Hebrew is a language. So in the English language, you can call the English English. The language and the name of the people are the same thing. But you don't really say I'm speaking Jewish, you'd be speaking Yiddish.
Yiddish or Hebrew?
Or Hebrew. You don't speak Jewish. Do you get me? In England, you're English and you speak English.
And Yiddish and Hebrew are two different languages.
I think so. I think so. And I don't understand any of this. This is why the thing I've written today is just a whole pile of questions with a few statements that I've written sprinkled in amongst it. And it is meant to agitate people's intellect to actually question what they think they know, because what they think they know, as far as I can see, doesn't make any sense. And I'm a fairly self-educated guy and extremely inquisitive about the knowledge that the world teaches that I don't understand, that I try to understand by questioning it. And another statement to make is that I could pick the worst from the Arab statements, such as the statement that Israel keeps saying is that Arabs want to exterminate all Jews. Right? So I could pick the worst of what some Arabs have said and make out that all Arabs say this. The lowest common denominator on the hatred scale of just annihilate them because we don't like them. And I can quote the worst from the Israelis in the modern day. So I can quote from Hamas and say, the Israelis are telling me that Hamas say that Hamas will never rest until they wiped out and exterminated all Jews. And I can listen to other people quoting Netanyahu, who is saying that we're not going to rest until we've wiped out all Hamas. And that because the Palestinians in Gaza democratically elected Hamas, that means that all Palestinians are Hamas. So
which is what's being said.
This is being said,
Yeah.
yes, this is being said, and it makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
But my point here is that I'm just quoting the lowest common denominator of hatred in two different cultures. And they're both saying, let's wipe each other out. The other side of it is I can try and understand the Arab Muslim religion, which is an Abrahamic religion, and try and make sense of the highest level of what are these guys actually saying about the nature of reality and the nature of the manifest civilized human mind from the Garden of Eden onwards. So the Arabs are saying some really profound things about human nature and about how to live in this world in order to achieve peace. So the thing about both the religions is both the religions are saying we're living through barbaric times, and if we behave well in following the codes that God has given us, then we will eventually reach peace. Do you get me? So those testaments are saying it's very war-torn. Life is full of unforeseen consequences of an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. So if you want to not blind yourself, learn not to cut your own eyes out. Both religions are trying to say, if you live in a good way in life, then eventually you will live in peace. And so in practicality, those tribal religions are saying, fuck, stuff keeps going wrong in our own families. Brothers turn against brothers. Fathers turn against children. There's loads of fucking confusion. And natural disasters that can afflict your people. So how to govern your people in a way where you actually survive and prosper in the end. You get to live in an earth that is a peaceful empire. That's what they're both promising, kind of thing. And the Christian is also promising that.
Mm-hmm.
So inherent is a change of state. Oh, here is humanity. Humanity are cursed to not know what the fuck the consequences are of their mistakes. But they keep on making mistakes. And those mistakes are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Like inflation. And this is destined as a test from God to see if we can grow from imperfect creatures. If we align with God, can we become perfect creatures? So the change of state is from a fraction becoming a whole. Yeah. That Adam evolving to a Messiah kind of thing. So it's suggesting that yes, we can grow from bacteria to extremely benevolent, from parasites to healthy guts, you could say. We can go through this from lead to gold. If you go with the esoteric version of all of these religions. And so again, this is stuff that isn't in those questions, but in the answers to these questions, it brings you into what's called the esoteric Western magical tradition, which is everything to do with the tarot and everything to do with the Torah, but what's that Jewish mysticism
Kabbalah.
called? Kabbalah and all of that stuff. And all of that stuff is a synthesis of these fundamental beliefs. So you're taking things from Egyptian, from Jewish, from Christian, from pantheist, from European, from India. You're taking things from all of these cultures and you're creating fast track individual path, taking the best from all of these collectives. So all that magical realm is the realm of secret societies, which is the esoteric of the religious stuff. So everything that I'm saying in these questions is looking at the exoteric information that the religions are giving us. None of this makes any sense. There must be some unifying code that we are not being taught on the inside of these stories. We're just being shown the outside of these stories and you can't make sense of it. Can't find peace with it, you could say. But if the internal codex was, if you had the inner story, if you were privy to all the text, then you'd be able to understand them. But when you've only got 5% of the text, it's very hard to work out the whole story. So the esoteric secret societies have the whole story, and they only give 5% of that story out in their religious texts for the masses. And the masses don't know that there is 95% of the text is missing. Okay. Go on.
So that leads into the next question, actually. Is the one God is the Son of God, belief originally Judaic or Egyptian?
So again, as far as I'm aware from my scant knowledge from the world says that the Son of God is Egyptian.
Why? Why do American presidents, European presidents, and British prime ministers all claim to have Davidic genetic inheritance?
Yeah, so they're all claiming they're claiming on the one hand to know their family trees. So they've come from families who have generations and generations of records of who their ancestors are. And sure enough, all of this political class have access to all those records of their genetic lineage going back hundreds and thousands of years. And these ruling royalties and
Like
politicians.
pedigree dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, genetic. So David Cameron and all the other top politicians who get to be prime ministers all happen to be, and the same with America and Europe, they all happen to have esoteric knowledge of their own bloodlines that go all the way back to the line of David. So they all do. That's their claim.
Why do all European royal families claim to have Davidic genetic inheritance?
Because they are royal families of the line of Judah, of the line of David. That's what makes them of the royal line, is they claim to be of that specific line. So all these royal families of Europe all claim descent from Jewish heritage. That's their claim.
Because
Their history books are full of it.
Because that way they are the chosen people?
Well, yeah, so in the esoteric tradition, or to anyone who just tries to make sense of this stuff, if they bother to even try and find out what to make sense of. But if there are these lost tribes in the story, and there are these known tribes in the story, and there are these ruling families in the story, what's missing from a story tells a lot. But you can only know what's missing from the story if you think outside the story a little bit, or you have something else to compare it to. So if I can say there are things missing from the story that everybody's been taught in the exoteric religions, if I'm aware of things that are missing from those stories, then I know they're missing. Now, what is missing from all of those stories is any awareness of what's going on in Europe or the rest of the world at the time that the Old Testament stories are going on, or at the time that the New Testament story is going on. So the point there being is the Old Testament stories are talking about lots of other tribes who are not Jewish, and of the wars and conquests going on between these tribes. These tribes are named, kind of thing. So it's historical context. This isn't just a religious story. This is a historic story because it's validated in other people's history. But what's particularly missing is the Irish and British and European culture. It's as if we don't exist. It's as if nobody from the West ever went to the Middle East. And it's just patently not true to say that no Europeans or British or Irish heritage, so-called Druidic. Now, in Britain, the idea that there were gods and goddesses here in the same way as there were gods and goddesses in the Middle East, representing all those other cultures, okay, and including the Hebrew god type of thing. So with the Moses story, again, you've got the idea that the Jewish God, the one God idea, through Moses and his brother, are standing up against the Egyptian gods, and they're fighting each other. So in the Old Testament, there's an acknowledgement that there are lots of gods, just like there are lots of peoples. And the way God talks, like is God described, but the way God is described in those oldest texts make him out to be a God who's very much saying, look, you got to fight these other gods, and that means you've got to fight the people of these other gods, and I'm the most powerful God, so I'll make sure that you defeat them, type of thing. And the name Deus for God, and in Irish it's Dia, and Dia is so like the word idea that I tend to think that God is an idea. And so different ideas are held by different tribes, and those different ideas
Also reminds me of day.
challenge each other. Yeah.
Day is light, is sun.
So where are the Stone Age gods of Ireland and Britain and Europe, the so-called pagan gods?
What do you mean, where are they?
They're not in any of the Jewish texts. There should be some mention of them over thousands of years. We're not nobodies, and we're not far away. You know, fair enough, the Chinese or
I suppose
any of that stuff.
That isn't the message isn't a message professed saying to drop all other gods apart from the one God. So to go into them would be giving them validity in that sense. So that would be explain their absence because they don't exist according to the one God, and that any mention of them would
for
be...
example, so we're back to King David and his son Solomon. And that's 3,000 years ago. And he's hanging out with the Queen of Egypt, or whatever she is, Sheba. Making babies and all sorts of things, making trade agreements. Giving her everything she desired is pretty much what the quote is, I think. Which included a child type thing. But it's about the uniting of nations within empires. So given that it speaks about uniting nations within empires as far afield as up to Egypt and out to the Mediterranean Sea that's got access all the way to China, it mentions that kind of stuff, essentially. And yet somehow it just doesn't mention that the nearest neighbours to the west have a great big culture, and it pretends as if there was no interaction between those cultures. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the Irish texts, we know that people from the Middle East were travelling and recognised in our countries, and that we were going to their countries, and that there's thousands of years of interaction between these cultures. Because I'm aware of the Irish mythology, I'm aware of that. Whereas for people who aren't aware of the Irish mythology, they just aren't aware that it's not included, that it's missing. So to me, it's obvious that it's been scrubbed from those texts. Whereas to people who've never thought about it, it's just, well, there must be must be a quite natural reason within the Jewish thing why they wouldn't.
So can you give an example of an Irish mythology that that enlightens that relationship?
Yeah, there are burial places in Ireland that are said to be the burial places of people from Egypt and people from the Middle East.
Such as?
It's tied in with Jeremiah and Jeremiah's daughters, and one of those being called Scotia, which is where the ancient Irish were called Scotia, and when those ancient Irish became mainly seated in Scotland and someone else was overlaying Ireland, that's how Scotland got its name, as Scotland, type of thing. And she's apparently Scotia is the daughter of the Jewish family, although they came over through Egypt, type of thing. And it all harkens back to this relationship between the Jews and the Egyptians that's symbolized in Moses living amongst the royal house of Egypt. And Moses is the one who goes and speaks to the one God on Sinai and is given these laws. But Moses has been brought up as an Egyptian and then implements an Egyptian theosophy to the Jewish people. And they have to wander around in the desert for 40 years in order to qualify for their promised land. But they have to learn to serve the one God and not any of the other gods in those 40 years of wandering in the desert. Get me? The Jews at that point
So they spent 40 years wandering in the desert and Jesus spends 40 days.
Yeah. Weird, huh? But again, get your head around this. The Jews are in captivity in Egypt. Moses grows up amongst that family. Moses wins bargaining power against his stepdad or adoptive father, the emperor, Pharaoh of Egypt. And he has a magical battle. Moses and his brother Aaron have a magical druidic battle against the Egyptian magicians. And Jehovah's magic beats their Egyptian magic. And therefore the Jews all gather and escape from Egypt. And Moses parts the Red Sea, and the Jews all go through in their chariots, and then the Egyptians go to follow them through the parted seas, and the seas come together and drown the Egyptian troops. So Jehovah God defeated the material army of the Egyptian God. And the Egyptian God is called Ra, which is central to Israel.
What's the significance of Mount Sinai?
The famous significance of it is that this is where the Jews were in the wandering around in the desert time when Moses went up the mountain to go, how the fuck am I supposed to lead these people to believe in one God when they aren't listening to me? They're believing in loads of gods. And God gives them clay tablets, and he comes down with these laws and speaks them to the Jews. And the Jews make a golden calf. Yeah, they make an effigy to a god of, what's called? Ox, animal, an animal god, a pagan god. They make a gold effigy for the pagan god. And Moses goes, I fucking told you, stop worshipping those pagan gods. There's only the monotheistic Egyptian understanding of God. And he's going to punish the fuck out of you lot if you don't recognize that there's only one God. And here are my laws. I'm the one God. You shall have no other gods before me. You can't have this golden effigy.
Which is a calf.
God. Yeah.
So a golden calf, not a red heifer.
Now, the red heifer's a different prophecy for a different scenario, but another example of this
So then what would be the significance of saying to the Palestinians in Gaza, listen, stop living here, just go to Mount Sinai? Is that like
The other thing I wonder about is that all sides are calling Palestine Palestine. Why is that? I don't know. And the idea that this spot is the spot that was given to the Zionists to create the state of Israel. This is where presumably Israel used to be, and they're just returning home to Israel. That seems to be what the idea is. Well, surely the Jews should be returning to Judea, not to Palestine. Do you get me? So where exactly is Judea, and why isn't Israel in Judea? And in looking back over the thing, Israel now is based on the Israel of King David and King Solomon 3,000 years ago. And King David, according to the Old Testament, King David is the king who defeated the other 11 tribes in order to unify them. So he beat all the other kings and said, I am the King of Kings. Yeah, he did that amongst his cousins. And they became the nation of Israel, therefore, or the nation of David. Yeah. And then they waged war against the lands surrounding them as a unified 12. There's lands that other people have around them, and they started killing those other people and saying, we're bigger than you, you're now assimilated into our Borg, type of thing. And that's the Davidic Empire. Now, just like in the Egyptian myth, a pharaoh, I think called Menzies, is said to be the one who united North and South and made Egypt into a one country, uniting North and South, which represents uniting the physical and the material. There's allegories in this esoteric side of it. But it's the exact same wording around David unifying the tribes of the North and South. And it's like Judah was the South or whatever, and the other 12 tribes, or whatever, 11 tribes, 10 tribes, whatever it is, they were the North, or vice versa. I'm not an expert, but Judah's either North or South, and the rest of them are the other half. And he unites the two halves. And Jerusalem is in the center of that. So that's when he takes Jerusalem from the Canaanites, this little village, and makes that the center, the political center of this united North and South, because it's in the middle. And so a little village is made the center of a nation. And Solomon is the one who builds the temple. So David is pushed out of the way by Solomon and Solomon's mother. And Solomon's mother is the wife of one of Solomon's generals. And Solomon, who was having babies with loads of people, decided he wanted to have babies with this woman because she was quite attractive to him. And so he sent the husband of this woman, he sent him off to a war where he was going to get killed, and he did get killed. And then he took her as a wife and had a child with her, as well as all the other children that he had. And that child of that woman is called Solomon. And that woman and that child, according to the Old Testament, did all this political fucking messing around to push David off his own throne and put Solomon on it, kind of thing. So Solomon became king without David having to die. It's the upshot of the language of that. And the great big empire that David built up that passed on to Solomon, Solomon spasmed it over the next decades.
What do you mean spasmed?
The empire didn't hold together and sort of collapsed.
Is that the same Solomon known as Wise Solomon?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same Solomon who took the child and suggested that they split the child in half if they couldn't agree.
Mm-hmm. Which would all be just teachings learned by those tribes over the years to say, how do you work out these conflicts that come up in all tribes? Yeah? And say, if that was a Jewish woman with one claim to the child and these people whose country David's army empire annexed, has she really got equal rights in David's kingdom? The woman whose lands they've just annexed and they don't really know fuck all about them, does she really get equal rights with the woman who is Jewish and the third cousin twice removed of the king himself? And according to what I read in Encyclopedia Britannica, David and Solomon were both very nepotistic in their empire, and that's roughly why their empire fell apart, is because they were treating themselves as better than everyone else. It wasn't equality in their kingdom. Now, my other point is that there is loads of Irish history of what was going on in Irish, British and European society at all of that time, and it was highly evolved, deep concepts of what God is, and essentially not very different in theological process than the Hebrew stories. And the other thing is that our stories are as old as their stories. Whereas with the Irish removed out of the story, the Hebrew version is the only story. It's the oldest story there is what people would believe. Whereas actually the Irish-British story is even older, because the Hebrew story only goes back to 4000 BC, whereas our stuff goes back all the way through the megalithic eras. There's no mention of megalithic cultures in anything in the Hebrew stories.
Can I go on to the next question?
Oh, is there another question?
There's a few, yeah.
Okay.
Why does the God of the Old Testament story say that humanity is a failure and must suffer punishments? I'll rephrase that, or just re-say it according to your spelling.
Yeah.
Why does the God of the Old Testamenty stories say that humanity is a failure and must suffer punishments?
So the mentes is just used the Latin for mind type thing. And testes, so testament is testes and mind, testicles and mind. And that's to do with that thing about cupping the balls. And that cupping the balls thing is something to do with, it is though, it's something to do with one of the patriarchs early on in the Jewish Testament. And it's all about who gets the inheritance and stuff. And I would have to go and study it to know the actual details, but roughly speaking, the testament is to say, here is the body of knowledge. Testes is the body side of the knowledge. So it's knowledge of spirituality. It's the body of knowledge of spirituality. Do you see how that becomes the body of knowledge of the tree of good and evil type of thing? So in that question, in all those early texts from Genesis to in between King David and Adam, there are these Genesis stories. Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, murder immediately going on between these brothers, and characteristics which are not godly. But that's not correct, because God is actually full of these characteristics. So, but there is killing. There are things that God has to give laws through Moses in order to go, look, you have to fucking stop killing each other and shit. You know, learn the lessons here. You're coveting each other's stuff and killing each other over it, and it's fucking with my plan for the earth type of thing. This is supposed to be a happy place where everyone's getting along in a democracy, and you're just fucking killing each other. And stranger than that is this idea that the Elohim is a plural of gods, and these Elohim have peoples, and in the version that people have, who the Nephilim are, they're godlike giants who came down from heaven and procreated in the physical realm with physical humans. And that created monstrosities on earth of these half-gods called the Nephilim. And the idea is that the Jewish God had to send the flood to earth, to flood the whole earth, in order to kill off everyone else except Noah's bloodline. And the idea is that Noah was the only human on the earth at that time, among the Judean people at least, who was good enough in his genetic seed. So there what we have is that Noah represents a genetic seed from Adam that hasn't been corrupted by this alien shit. That's basically what the Old Testament says. And Christians talk loads about this. These American born-again Christians and all of that mad Christian stuff that's developed talk about this stuff, but this stuff is all in Sumerian texts. Absolutely talking about Enlil and the Garden of Eden story from the point of view of it being like a genetic
So the failure. Sorry to interrupt you, but the failure then is in humanity procreating with those they shouldn't have outside of their kind.
So you've heard of an idea of the fall?
From the Eden story.
Well, I don't know, it's just called the fall, and
fall.
It's an idea, and maybe it's connected to the Eden thing, and maybe it's connected to other stories, and they're all jumbled up. It's one of the other stories that's all jumbled up.
The fall of Lucifer, or...
Yes, the fall of Lucifer is not the Garden of Eden story.
No.
Right, but they're conjoined stories. Somehow the Garden of Eden story is tied in with the Lucifer story.
It reminds me of within families where certain expectations are put upon the children, and if they don't meet those expectations of the parents, then they're disinherited. If they don't abide by a certain...
Yeah, and on some level the idea
pathway
of the Luciferians is to say that there could be a version of the story that sees things as that, according to the texts, Lucifer was God's favourite and most able and most loyal, closest to God. And God asked him to go down to the earth and do this thing, and for whatever reason, Lucifer is saying, I don't really want to go down to earth and do that. I want to stay here with you. And God was like, look, You have to go down and do this.
What was it he had to go down and do?
Shepherd humanity. So the idea is that Lucifer is an angel. So the idea is that in heaven, there's loads of angels. And Lucifer is one of those. And Gabriel is one of those. And they're blatantly coming from heaven and delivering messages to the Jews. Do you get me?
Hmm.
So this is really clear messages coming from some heavenly beings who are quite physical, who are gods. Yeah, when Lucifer is depicted, he is very physical. The idea that Lucifer now has a subterranean, subatomic astral plane in which he has to teach the harsh lesson to anyone who doesn't follow God's law. So the relationship between Lucifer and God is that Lucifer is having to do the dirty work of processing the humans who aren't perfect. For all of eternity until God perfects humans.
So,
and then there's this day of judgment stuff. So connection from Garden of Eden to Day of Judgment. Where does that happen? It must happen somewhere in the Old Testament into the New Testament.
Well, this next question is kind of revisiting stuff you've said.
Mm-hmm.
And also leading on from stuff you said. Why was man created in the image of God, yet also created with built-in defects, such that God flooded the earth and drowned every living thing except what Noah and the wife and kids' girlfriends could manage to get onto the Ark of the Covenant boat?
So at this stage, they're all just leading questions. Yeah, there's so much knowledge in the question that it's a leading question. You have to know the stuff that I've just told you about Noah and about genetic purity and stuff that's alluded to in other parts of the stories. You have to know about all these other parts of the stories in order to know what the link is between Adam and Jesus. You have to know about David, and you have to know about Noah, and you have to know about these Nephilim, and you have to know that the Jews have an idea that the humans have been defiled and are genetically impure. That's inherent in these stories, essentially. So only the line of David is pure, but before that, only the line of Noah was pure. And the only reason we know that Noah was the only pure person is because God said it. How did God say it? He apparently told some people to write it down. Do you get me? Now, according to the stories, this is where you're not supposed to be literal with these stories, but going by the story, it literally does say that Noah is the only Jew who survived the flood with his family and the animals that he brought with him. So this is the flood, therefore, is kind of talking about a new Eden, essentially. These are all pure animals and pure humans, and they're going to do a human 2.0, because human 1.0 has all of these flaws, and according to the story, God said, I'm going to flood the fucking place because you fucked it up. I'm going to have to start again with Noah. So God sends Noah messages to start building this boat to these exact dimensions. And he spends a good few years with his wife and kids building this gigantic big wooden boat in a place that isn't by the sea. Yeah. And everyone's like, Noah's gone fucking mad. Why the fuck's he doing this? Type thing. And then God sends down his judgments of the 40 years of rain, or whatever it might have been, 40 days and 40 nights of rain, or 40 years, but it's 40 again is in the story. And the sea levels rise.
What is the significance of 40?
Well, I don't know. That would, require looking up, but yeah, who knows? I don't know, but it is known, surely. Type thing. Psalm 40 is somehow a really special psalm as well. But yeah, it's all just esoteric fucking algorithms, all that stuff. I don't really go into any number stuff very much.
Okay.
Interesting. But so there is the idea of genetic purity in this tribe, who have a god who has wiped out most of his favorite tribe because they were polluted by other genetics of something called Nephilim. Plus at other points they're talking about things like Lucifer and all these beings being up in heaven with God. And the idea of a spiritual war, which is inherent in these religions as the spiritual war, is the idea that up in heaven this war broke out, with a third of the angels rebelling against God and coming down here, type of thing. So that's a bit like there's a bunch of terrorists down on Earth hiding out, and God's gonna fucking hunt them out of it. That's inherent in that story. And the Nephilim story combined with the Noah story is God hunting everyone but his pure blood. That seems to me to be what's said in these stories, but again, I haven't studied them as if they're my story. I've become aware of them because I have my own stories, and I'm struggling to compare my stories with what does the rest of the world know, and then trying to find out what the rest of the world knows. Well, it's big, the whole thing.
Okay, well, next question. Do you know that the Hebrew for covenant is pronounced as Brit?
I did know that. God knows how did I know that. Somebody told me, and eventually when the internet came around, I looked it up, and lo and behold, it's true.
What is the covenant between the Israeli God and the British people?
Yeah, so read the question again.
What is the covenant between the Israeli God and the British peoples?
So I'm just imagining now, imagine if I'd written that as, what is the covenant? And then answered, it's between the Hebrew God and the British people. Yeah. So again, like the Isaac's sons as the Saxons coming to Britain, like that language weirdness. There's no historical proof of what I'm saying, that the Saxons are actually one of these lost tribes of Israel. But the language could easily suggest that, just in that little weird sound. So why is Britain called Britain? I don't fucking know. What's the official version? I don't fucking know. Don't know why that's said to be. Just like I don't really know why it's said to be that the ruling families who have invaded Britain over the last 2,000 years, the Christian families who've invaded Britain, have been claiming to be Jewish Christians. And again, this is awkward because the Jews aren't Christians. They're Jews, and they'll always be Jews, unless they change state and stop being Jews to become Christians. Do you get me? So, linguistically, it's a coincidence that Britain has the word Brit in it, and Brit means covenant. And so the whole esoteric Rosicrucian secret society version of that is probably that Britain is the promised land. See, up until 1948, there is no Israel. Yeah, you've got the wandering Jews still wandering all over the place, type of thing.
Is it Blake who wrote about the hills of Jerusalem?
Yeah, so that whole understanding, which would all be esoteric, all essentially denied that it even exists. It's all secret society understanding of things. But if that's understood correctly, then hey, yeah, the promised lands are actually the British Isles, the lands of milk and honey, type of thing. The Eden, the unspoiled, there's some people living there, but we're gonna fucking teach them the law.
So then, how did Jewish mythology replace indigenous mythology?
Well, I mean, it would seem through constant warfare until our lands were conquered and our children were educated through economic warfare. Our children became educated in the Christian crusades of slaughter and pillage. Yeah, by military occupation until educational occupation over the space of hundreds of years. Is that the end of it?
That's it.
We put that on Facebook and YouTube.
I need to stop the recording. How do I do that?
Oh, yeah.